I've been wondering around here for a while, Stugotz, lamenting publicly in a way that probably has irritated our audience. This American movement toward if you have power and money in sports or outside of sports, you can get away with absolutely anything and everything if you're just willing to lean into being shameless. That shamelessness becomes a shield of immunity that will protect you from anything in the way of consequences. And you've heard me talk about it with Dana White. Not a lot of precedent for a person in that position of power in sports slapping his wife in public in a video that gets out and there being no consequences because he's got that much power. And the other one who's built just like him is Vince McMahon, who has had an assortment, a large resume filled with garbage that makes it known to all involved. It is no secret, a truly despicable human being. But we have finally found, evidently, where it is that the powerful, rich white man in America can actually lose something that he cares about. And the line, evidently, is in a lawsuit, it being alleged that you shot a woman during a threesome. That evidently is the final straw on Vince McMahon's WWE career. He does not want to leave that. He has been reluctant in every way to leave WWE, but he resigned at the end of last week while denying all of the allegations, but also got away from the entirety of this thing that he cares about, that he certainly didn't want to leave, and that he was exceptionally stubborn about not leaving. And I've got to be honest, I was surprised that he was gone only because I thought that he was going to be gone 5 or 6 other times, and he just stays there. And somehow, because he built the whole thing, somehow, because it's scripted and it's not really sports and he's just running a business, but now when you've got something that's publicly owned, there are stockholders and there are consequences. And I was relieved to finally see that there were consequences, that this man is being punished for what has been a vile, vile run of terror through making that sport hugely popular, bigger than it has ever been, but also making him so powerful that it didn't seem like anything was ever going to happen to him.
But surprised that he wasn't gone 5 stories ago, because I'm with you.
Yeah, well, he resigned last year,
but he was still hanging around the fringes.
Well, no,
right?
he was. I mean, there were allegations that he had people in place to help. Ronda Rousey actually levied one of those. She called out Bruce Pritchard as someone that was in creative, that as long as he's there, Vince McMahon will have influence over the company. But Vince McMahon did resign. Stephanie McMahon came in as a co-CEO with Nick Khan, and then Vince McMahon decided, you know what? I overreacted. I shouldn't have stepped down, and he came back in. And it was that action that made a real public headache for TKO, the company, the parent company behind WWE. What I find really fascinating, I've read the entire lawsuit, and WWE...
You left here last week shocked, and it's hard to shock you.
I was watching Mike walk around the office with a phone in his hand reading that story. It was crazy. He was freaking out.
It's depraved. It is a horrible abuse of power. You can certainly, if you follow the product close enough, even though they omit certain names, you can start deducing who is being talked about. And this is where WWE has a real problem on their hands. This is a toxic work environment culture, and this is just an isolated snapshot of probably something that was indicative of decades-long abusing of power. If this lawsuit continues, and TKO and WWE better hope it doesn't, you are going to see this play out in the public forum, and it is a nightmare scenario in terms of toxic workplace environments. I read that Ari Emanuel has had his daughter working in this company for several years now. So that has to scare him. What I found shocking about the resignation, just knowing Vince McMahon's will, is it was discussed prior to it that it was nearly impossible to oust Vince McMahon. Even if the shareholders held a vote, they would still need his signature. willingly to go around on it. His share in TKO was locked in. And the way that it happened was Slim Jim, who is a big presenting sponsor, has been synonymous with that product for several years, came out with a statement and it pulled its sponsorship from one of the marquee matches there. And then 2 hours later, you have news of Nick Khan announcing to the company that Vince McMahon has resigned, making this way easier than it could have been if he decided to fight it. But my main takeaway, and you can start looking at very suspicious timing, shock resignations from the company. Like, people that have done some reporting have known that there were rumors of this that maybe the company knew a year ago, even though the company's public stand is, we found out about this in real time. A horrific abuse of power. People being put in place and holding positions for years and decades in some cases because they were some of Vince's boys. And Vince taking care of his boys, trafficking this woman who is stuck in an impossible predicament, using her as a bargaining chip in negotiations. It is a horror story of the highest order. And if this continues to play out, if they don't settle, it might just be a drop in a relative bucket. Because I can't. Because when you have this toxic a work environment, there is no way this is an isolated incident. And when it comes to Vince McMahon, there's been several reporting that we know it is not with him. Crazy story. But I think the most shocking part about all of it is that he actually resigned. Because I thought he was built like everybody else who just is stubborn and will refuse to resign. And this actually shows for the first time that there's a new sheriff in town. There isn't a McMahon running WWE. There isn't a McMahon child that is next in line to replace Vince. This is a public company now, and it's a whole new day.
One of the things that is truly outside of my realm of understanding, Stugotz, I don't have an ability to grasp some of what it is that we're talking about. If you think of rape as something that the people who study this type of stuff would tell you, it's an act of power. It's not even a sexual act. It's power is what's happening there. To distort it so much that you arrive at the point that the detail, I think, now there are a lot of details in this lawsuit that are really troubling, and I should have probably said before we even headed down this conversation, I should have probably trigger alerted all of you on some of these details from this lawsuit are truly horrifying, and the sex trafficking on its own, I think, is something that no one should be immune to. But I think the detail that got him gone for people who don't want to read the entirety of a lawsuit or just see bullet point after horrifying bullet point is the act of being so dehumanizing to somebody that you on them. That one detail
of all the details.
There's plenty.
There's plenty more.
There's a nameless WWE superstar that everyone, because of the timeline and because of the descriptive nature of the lawsuit, has deduced this is Brock Lesnar. There was a time in the lawsuit where Brock Lesnar has communication with this victim, and it's working towards Vince McMahon trying to set up a party amongst the three. Said WWE superstar gets too inebriated at dinner, God, what that might look like, that he just hops back on the plane. And then Vince McMahon goes back with the victim and role plays as if he is Brock Lesnar in this case. And that's where a lot of physical injuries happened to the alleged victim. The story that that her lawyers put out there of her being barely able to walk, in pain for weeks. All this happening, by the way, during the COVID lockdown. It's sick, depraved behavior. Imagining that other male talent from the WWE's roster is in the room, him showing pictures to people, as he described as tech boys, photos of this woman where she's saying, and you see the text like, please don't do that, and he doesn't care. He's like, oh, they love it. A referee that's unnamed, another high-ranking a WWE official that is named, his physical rehabilitator That's something that seemed like that was a long-running thing. The head of talent relations, and that was a brutal, where he essentially forced this woman, Vince McMahon did, to serve herself as breakfast to her head of talent relations, town to town, meet in the hotel, report back the details of your sexual encounter. Just a nightmare that this woman was trapped in.
I don't understand, Stugotz. I really don't. It's such a distortion that it is legitimately confusing to me. How? And if you follow professional wrestling at all, you know that it is littered with partying and abuse of substances, and that the lifestyle is several realms beyond gluttonous and decadent and dangerous. Professional wrestlers die early. There's a lot of physical pain involved. There's a lot of medicating in order to sort of numb the physical pain. But to live in that world for so long, to oversee and have the power in that world for so long, that it distorts you so much as a human being that the only way that you can keep chasing the highs of the highs is to dehumanize people more and more, because you've been doing it for so many years and so many decades when you're in charge of overseeing this thing, and there are never consequences. To get to the point where you are somebody who can behave this way and not think it's going to become something that becomes a public shame for you that comes with consequences, that you keep pushing the envelope further and further on how much you're going to dehumanize people.
Because you think you can.
By exerting your power over them?
Well, in part because he did. He came to an agreement with an NDA, and the reason why this is playing out in public is because the payment stopped. The payment stopped, and he was in breach of the non-disclosure.
I'm not kidding you, Stugotz, where when I'm reading this, I don't understand how you reach a level of that kind of evil without realizing that you've become evil.